I am Marcus, 34, the middle child from an upper-middle-class family in Ohio. Growing up, I always sensed I was the least favorite, but never imagined how blatant it would become. My parents gifted my siblings $200,000 each after college while tossing me scraps. The ultimate irony. Today, I am the successful one CEO of my own tech startup worth millions while they have lost everything. Now they are knocking at my door, hands outstretched. Before I dive into this wild family drama, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you want more stories about family karma coming full circle. Growing up in suburban Cleveland, Ohio, my childhood looked normal from the outside. Our two-story colonial house sat on a tree-lined street in a respectable neighborhood where kids rode bikes until streetlights came on. My father, Richard, worked as an investment banker at a prestigious firm downtown, while my mother, Elizabeth, sold high-end real estate. We took annual vacations to Florida, had 2 cars in the driveway, and never worried about paying bills. By all appearances, we were the picture-perfect American family, mother, father, and 3 children, spaced perfectly apart. I am the middle child, sandwiched between my older sister Amanda, now 36, and my younger brother Jason, now 30. Being the middle child often comes with jokes about being forgotten or overlooked. But in my case, the stereotype became my painful reality. The first memory I have of noticing something was off came on my 8th birthday. Amanda had turned 10 just 2 months earlier, and her celebration had been an elaborate affair at an indoor water park with 20 friends, custom-designed invitations, and a professional cake that must have cost hundreds. For my birthday, Mom baked a simple chocolate cake, and we had 3 neighborhood kids over for pizza in our basement. When I asked why my party was so much smaller, Mom patted my head and said, "You are more independent, honey. You do not need all that fuss." I accepted this explanation because children trust their parents implicitly. But as years passed, a pattern emerged that became impossible to ignore. When Amanda turned 16, my parents surprised her with a brand new red Volkswagen Beetle with a massive bow on top. The whole neighborhood heard her squeals of delight. They hosted a sweet 16 party at a country club with a live band. 2 years later, when my 16th birthday arrived, I received driving lessons and access to the family's old Honda Civic with 120,000 miles on it. Mom explained they were teaching me responsibility by having me share the family car instead of getting my own. I tried not to let it bother me. Perhaps they were right. Maybe I did need to learn responsibility more than my sister did. So I doubled down on earning their approval through other means. I maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA throughout high school, while Amanda struggled to maintain a 3.0. I joined the track team and won state championships in long-distance running. I volunteered at the local animal shelter every weekend. I did everything I could think of to make them proud. Yet even with these achievements, the pattern continued. When I won the state championship in cross-country, my father missed the event for one of Jason's Little League games, despite Jason being a bench warmer who rarely played. When I was accepted into National Honor Society, my mother could not attend the ceremony because she was helping Amanda shop for a prom dress. Jason, younger than me by 4 years, became the most apparent favorite as he grew older. My parents attended every one of his soccer games, regardless of how minor. They hired private tutors at the first sign of academic struggle. When he turned 16, they bought him a new Jeep Wrangler, even nicer than Amanda's first car, claiming cars are safer now and we worry about accidents. Despite the obvious favoritism, I maintained a positive attitude. I began working part-time jobs at 16, first at a grocery store, then at a local coffee shop, saving every dollar I could. While my siblings received generous allowances for minimal chores, I learned to budget, save, and manage money by necessity. I opened my first investment account at 17 with $500 I had saved from 8 months of bagging groceries. These early lessons in financial independence would later become my greatest asset, though I could not have known it then. High school graduation approached with me at the top of my class. Valedictorian, perfect grades, athletic achievements, community service awards. I had done everything right, hoping my parents would finally see my worth. As I stood at the podium delivering my graduation speech about perseverance and future potential, I spotted my parents in the audience. For once, they were focused entirely on me, and I thought maybe things would change. Maybe college would be the fresh start where their treatment of their children would finally become equal. I could not have been more wrong. With my excellent grades and extracurricular achievements, I received acceptance letters from several prestigious universities, including 2 Ivy League schools. When the financial aid packages arrived, I sat down with my parents, expecting them to help me choose the best option, just as they had done with Amanda 4 years earlier. "We can contribute about $5,000 per year toward your education," my father said, sliding a calculator across the table. "You will need to figure out the rest through scholarships, loans, or work." I stared at him confused. "But you paid for Amanda's full tuition at Princeton. That must have cost over $50,000 per year." My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Amanda needed more support. You have always been so independent." That independence, which I now recognized as their excuse for treating me differently, had become my curse. I accepted a partial academic scholarship to Ohio State University, which covered about half of my tuition. For the remainder, I took out student loans and committed to working throughout my college years. During my freshman year, I shared a cramped dorm room with 2 other students to save on housing costs. I worked 20 hours weekly at the university library while taking a full course load. Meanwhile, Amanda had graduated from Princeton and moved back to Ohio, where she had landed a job at a marketing firm through one of our father's connections. At Thanksgiving break during my sophomore year, Amanda mentioned casually over dinner that she was looking at condos to buy. So, soon after graduation, I asked surprised she could afford real estate on an entry-level salary. Amanda looked confused, then glanced at our parents. "Well, with the graduation gift Mom and Dad gave me, I can afford a decent down payment." "What graduation gift?" I asked, looking from her to my parents. There was an uncomfortable silence before Amanda continued. "The $200,000. Did they not tell you about that? Mom and Dad give each of us $200,000 when we graduate college? It is like our family tradition or something." I nearly choked on my mashed potatoes. $200,000. That was more money than I could comprehend as a student surviving on ramen noodles and working part-time for minimum wage. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to correct her or explain, but they simply continued eating, avoiding my gaze. That night, I could not sleep. I kept calculating what I could do with $200,000, pay off my student loans, which would be around $40,000 by graduation, have a down payment for a modest house, perhaps even start a small business. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time I allowed myself to feel excited about a future without financial struggle. The next morning, I approached my father in his home office. "Dad, Amanda mentioned the graduation gift you give. Is that really true? $200,000? He looked up from his newspaper. "Yes, that is what we gave Amanda. And we plan to do the same for Jason." "And for me too, right?" I asked, hope rising in my chest. My father cleared his throat. "Well, son, your mother and I have been discussing this, and we think in your case, we might structure things differently." "Differently how?" "You have always been more impulsive with money. We think a large sum might not be the best thing for you. Perhaps we could help you in other ways, like career guidance or networking opportunities." I stood there stunned. Impulsive with money. "Dad, I have been working since I was 16. I paid for my own car insurance all through high school. I have student loans because you decided not to pay for my college. How exactly am I impulsive with money?" "That is not what I meant," he backpedaled. "It is just that Amanda had very specific plans for her future, and Jason has already shown interest in entrepreneurship." "And what about my plans? My future? Does that not matter?" "Of course it matters," he set his tone, suggesting the conversation was over. "We will discuss this more when you are closer to graduation." I returned to college after that break with a heavy heart and a new understanding of my place in the family. The illusion that my parents would eventually treat us equally had been shattered. Now I knew the truth: I was, and would always be, the least favored child. The remainder of my college years became a blur of exhaustion and determination. I took on additional jobs, sometimes working 35 hours a week while maintaining my studies. I moved off campus to a tiny apartment shared with 3 other students to save on housing costs. I ate cheap meals, never bought new clothes, and used the library's computers because I could not afford my own laptop. Despite these hardships, I excelled academically. I discovered a passion for computer programming through a free community coding program I attended on weekends. Since I could not afford to change my major to computer science, it would have required additional semesters and more student loans. I continued with my business degree while teaching myself coding skills on the side. I made friends with tech-savvy students who recognized my potential and shared their knowledge. One friend, Devin, who would later become my mentor, let me use his computer to practice coding late at night after he finished his own assignments. Throughout these struggles, I maintained a relationship with my family, calling home weekly and visiting on major holidays. I never mentioned the $200,000 revelation again, hoping that perhaps my father had reconsidered or that my mother might advocate for me behind the scenes. Finally, graduation day arrived. I had earned my business degree with honors, despite working multiple jobs and teaching myself an entirely new skill set in programming. My parents and siblings attended the ceremony, and for a brief moment as I crossed the stage to receive my diploma, I felt a surge of hope that maybe, just maybe, they would recognize my achievements with the same generosity they had shown Amanda. After the ceremony, we gathered at a restaurant for a celebration lunch. My parents presented me with a greeting card. Inside was a $500 gift card to Best Buy and a note saying they were proud of me. That evening, they also gave me a used laptop they had purchased, refurbished, explaining it would help with my job search. $500 and a second-hand laptop. After watching my sister receive $200,000 and knowing my brother would receive the same. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I confronted my parents in their kitchen. "Is that it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "A gift card and a used laptop." My mother looked confused. "Honey, we thought you would be happy with the laptop. You mentioned needing one. Amanda got $200,000 when she graduated. Jason will get the same, and I get $500. My father sighed. "Marcus, we have been over this. We do not think a large sum of money is what you need right now. You need to learn financial responsibility first." Based on what evidence? I demanded, my voice rising. "I have worked since I was 16. I put myself through college while working multiple jobs. I have never asked you for money, unlike Amanda and Jason, who constantly ask for handouts. How exactly am I the financially irresponsible one?" My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Sweetie, it is not that simple. Your sister and brother just have different needs." "No," I interrupted, years of hurt finally boiling over. "You have always favored them. Always. I was never good enough, no matter what I achieved. And now you are not even trying to hide it anymore." My father's face hardened. "That is enough, Marcus. We are your parents, and we do not have to justify our decisions to you. What we do with our money is our business." In that moment, something broke inside me, the last thread of hope that they might ever see me as equal to my siblings. "You are right," I said quietly. "It is your money, and this is my life. I need to go." I walked out of their house that night with tears streaming down my face, feeling utterly betrayed and worthless in their eyes. Little did I know that this painful moment would become the catalyst for the greatest transformation of my life. The drive back to my apartment that night was a blur through tears and anger. When I arrived home, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I needed distance from my family to heal and find my own path. I did not dramatically declare I was cutting them off. I simply stopped initiating contact and responded minimally when they reached out. For the next several months, I focused entirely on building my future. With my business degree and self-taught coding skills, I secured an entry-level position at a small tech startup in Seattle. My college roommate had moved there 6 months earlier and offered his couch until I could afford my own place. Seattle represented everything I needed: distance from Ohio, a thriving tech scene, and a fresh start where no one knew me as the less favored child. I packed everything I owned into my Honda Civic, which now had over 150,000 miles on it, and drove across the country to begin my new life. The starting salary at the tech company was modest, but it was more money than I had ever earned. I found the cheapest apartment possible, a 400-square-foot studio, in a less desirable neighborhood, with unreliable heating and noisy neighbors. But it was mine, and for the first time, I felt a sense of freedom and possibility. My role at the startup involved basic coding and customer support, nothing glamorous, but it provided a foot in the door of the tech industry. While other new employees complained about long hours or boring tasks, I approached every assignment with the same determination that had gotten me through college. I arrived an hour early each day to study the company's codebase, stayed late to help with projects outside my department, and spent weekends teaching myself additional programming languages. My tiny apartment contained only a mattress on the floor, a folding table that served as both desk and dining table, and a single chair. I owned 2 pots, 1 pan, and enough dishes for just myself. Every spare dollar went toward paying off my student loans or building an emergency fund. I did not own a television, never ate at restaurants, and found free community events for entertainment. 6 months into my new job, I caught the attention of a senior developer named Devin, coincidentally sharing the same name as my college friend. Devin became an unexpected mentor, recognizing my hunger to learn and willingness to tackle difficult problems. "You work like someone with something to prove," he commented one evening, as we were both staying late to fix a critical bug in the system. "Maybe I do," I responded, not elaborating further. Devin took me under his wing, sharing knowledge that would have taken me years to learn on my own. He invited me to sit in on meetings with the development team, gave me increasingly challenging assignments, and advocated for my promotion to junior developer after just 9 months. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, allowing me to start building substantial savings while still living frugally. 18 months after joining the company, I was promoted again to full developer based on my performance and growing expertise. During this time, I identified a significant inefficiency in how financial data was processed through our company's software. After hours, I developed a prototype solution, an algorithm that could streamline transaction processing and reduce errors by over 70%. When I showed it to Devin, he immediately arranged a meeting with the company's executives. "This could change everything about how we approach financial data processing," he told them, as I demonstrated my prototype. "Marcus has identified and solved a problem we did not even realize we had." The executives were impressed enough to offer me a small equity stake, just 1%, to fully develop my solution as an official company project. I worked 16-hour days for months, refining the algorithm and creating a user-friendly interface. The technical breakthrough that made my software unique was its ability to adapt to different financial systems without requiring custom coding for each client. While competitors required weeks of customization for new customers, my system could integrate within days. 2 years after joining the company, my software became our flagship product, attracting the attention of larger tech firms. When a major financial technology company offered to acquire our startup, my 1% equity, which had seemed like a generous bonus at the time, translated into a $1.5 million payout. At 28 years old, I suddenly had more money than I ever imagined possessing. My first thought was not of luxury purchases or celebration, but of security and growth. I paid off my remaining student loans, purchased a modest but nice apartment in Seattle, and invested 70% of the remaining funds in a diversified portfolio. With the final portion, about $400,000, I made the most consequential decision of my career, starting my own company. For the first 6 months, my company existed only as an idea and some promising code I developed in coffee shops around Seattle. I recruited 2 former colleagues who believed in my vision, offering them generous equity stakes in lieu of the full salaries I could not yet afford to pay. We created a prototype of specialized AI-based software for financial services building on my previous work, but taking it in a new direction. With our prototype and business plan, we secured seed funding from a venture capital firm that specialized in financial technology. The early days were brutal. We worked from a tiny office space that doubled as my apartment. Our equipment was secondhand, our furniture salvaged from office buildings being renovated. I took no salary for the first year, living off my savings and pouring every resource into the company. The first version of our software had critical flaws that nearly sank the company 3 months after launch. For 2 weeks straight, my team and I worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts on the office floor, to rebuild the core system from scratch. That crisis taught us resilience and humility, forcing us to listen more carefully to customer feedback and test more thoroughly before releases. Slowly we gained traction. Our software solved genuine problems for financial institutions, reducing their processing costs by an average of 40%. Word spread within the industry, and our client list grew from 3 local credit unions to over 20 regional banks within 18 months. By year 3, we had 50 employees and moved into legitimate office space in downtown Seattle. Our second round of funding valued the company at $40 million, with me retaining 40% ownership. On paper, I was worth $16 million, though most of that wealth remained tied to the company's future success. Throughout this period of intense growth and occasional setbacks, I maintained minimal contact with my family. I sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts, called on major holidays, but shared little about my professional life. They knew I worked in computers in Seattle, but I never corrected their assumption that I was still a low-level employee at someone else's company. This distance was not about revenge or waiting to prove them wrong. It was about protecting the fragile confidence I was building, focusing on my path without the weight of their judgment or the pain of their favoritism. In the absence of their validation, I had finally learned to validate myself. As I stood in my office on my 32nd birthday looking out at the Seattle skyline and the company I had built, I realized something profound. The greatest gift my parents had unknowingly given me was the need to rely completely on myself. Their rejection had forced me to find strength I might never have discovered otherwise. I had no way of knowing that this hard-won independence would soon be tested in ways I never expected, as the family that had once dismissed me would soon come calling for help. The call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October, nearly 5 years after my college graduation. I was in the middle of a meeting with potential investors when my assistant interrupted to say my brother Jason was on the line, insisting it was urgent. I had not spoken to Jason in over 3 months, so the urgency in his voice made me step out to take the call. "Marcus, thank God you picked up," Jason said, his voice tight with stress. "We have a situation, a family situation." "What is going on?" I asked, immediately concerned, despite our complicated relationship. "It is Dad," he said. "He made some really bad investments over the past couple years. Really bad. They have lost almost everything." I sat down in the hallway outside the conference room, struggling to process this information. My father had been an investment banker for over 30 years. Financial management was his expertise. "What do you mean by almost everything?" I asked. "The house is gone. They had to sell it and move into a 2-bedroom apartment. Dad was forced into early retirement, though he calls it consulting. And Mom's real estate business has been struggling since the market crashed. They are basically living on their retirement funds now, and those took a massive hit too." As Jason explained further, the picture became clearer. Our father had become overconfident in his investment abilities and put significant portions of their savings into high-risk ventures that promised exceptional returns. When those investments failed, he doubled down rather than cutting losses, ultimately depleting their reserves to a fraction of what they once were. "That is terrible," I said sincerely. "Despite everything, I would never wish financial hardship on my parents. Are they okay otherwise, health-wise?" "They are stressed, obviously." "Look, there is more." Jason paused. "Remember that money they gave me after graduation? The $200,000? I remember I said, my tone neutral despite the pang I still felt. "It is gone. All of it." His voice cracked. "I started this high-end clothing store with a friend. We had these amazing plans, but the location was wrong and our supplier screwed us over. We closed after 8 months. I lost everything. Plus, I took out loans for the business that I cannot pay back now." I was not entirely surprised. Jason had always had grand ideas but little patience for the unglamorous work of building something sustainable. "And Amanda?" I asked, guessing where this conversation was heading. "Not good either. She and Steven bought that huge house in Shaker Heights, way more than they could afford, honestly. Then Steven lost his job at the firm last year. They are underwater on the mortgage, and the bank is threatening foreclosure." I closed my eyes, seeing the complete picture now. "So why are you calling me Jason? What do you need?" There was a long pause before he answered. "I hate to even ask this, but we heard you might be doing pretty well out there. Something about a startup mom ran into your old friend Tyler, who mentioned you had your own company now. I do. I confirmed, offering no details. Well, I was wondering if maybe you could loan me some money to get back on my feet. Just temporarily. Maybe 20,000. I have this new business idea that cannot miss. Jason, I interrupted. This sounds like something we should discuss as a family. All of us together. So you will help. The hope in his voice was palpable. I did not say that. I said we should talk. All of us. I can fly back to Ohio this weekend. After hanging up, I returned to my investor meeting, but my mind was elsewhere. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. For years I had been the family member deemed financially irresponsible, the one who could not be trusted with a significant gift, the one who needed to learn responsibility. Now they were turning to me for rescue. That weekend I flew to Cleveland and rented a car to drive to my parents' new apartment in a modest complex on the outskirts of the city. The building was clean but basic, a far cry from the spacious colonial home where I had grown up. When my mother opened the door, I was shocked by her appearance. In just a few years, she seemed to have aged a decade. Her once perfect hair was streaked with gray, and the confident posture I remembered had given way to a slight stoop. "Marcus," she said, embracing me tightly, "thank you for coming." Inside the apartment was cramped with furniture that was clearly too large for the space remnants of their previous life, crammed into quarters that could not accommodate them. My father sat in his leather armchair, looking smaller somehow. Amanda and her husband Stephen were already there seated on the couch, and Jason paced near the kitchen. We exchanged awkward greetings before sitting down to the dinner my mother had prepared. The conversation remained superficial throughout the meal. Questions about Seattle comments, on the weather observations, about how I looked healthy. No one mentioned the reason for my visit until we had finished eating and moved to the living room area. "So Jason tells me there have been some financial challenges," I said, breaking the tension. My father cleared his throat. "That is one way to put it. The market has not been kind to those of us nearing retirement age." As the evening progressed, I learned the full extent of their financial mismanagement. My father had ignored the advice of colleagues and invested heavily in speculative technology stocks and a friend's real estate development that ultimately failed. My mother's real estate business had declined as younger agents with digital marketing skills captured the market. Between their losses and their continued financial support of my siblings, their retirement fund was now less than a quarter of what they had planned. Jason had not only lost his $200,000 gift on his failed clothing store, but had accumulated nearly $100,000 in business debt. He was currently living in our parents' second bedroom while working part-time at a sporting goods store. Amanda and Stephen had purchased a 5-bedroom house with a pool and tennis court, taking on a mortgage that required both of their substantial salaries to afford. When Stephen lost his job, they began missing payments. Despite this crisis, they had recently purchased a new luxury SUV, which Amanda justified as necessary for the children's activities. As the details emerged, I noticed a pattern: no one was taking responsibility for their choices. My father blamed the market and dishonest business partners. Jason blamed his store's location and suppliers. Amanda blamed the economy and her children's needs. And throughout it all, my parents continued to enable my siblings, giving them what little remained of their resources. Finally, after hours of discussion, my father turned to me with an expression I recognized from childhood, the look he gave when he expected me to comply without question. "So Marcus, Jason mentions you have done well for yourself out west. We are proud of you, son. And now, well, family helps family in times of need. We were thinking you might be in a position to help us get back on our feet." My mother nodded encouragingly. Nothing extravagant, just enough to clear some of these immediate debts and give everyone a fresh start. I did some quick mental calculations based on what they had shared. Between my parents' debts, Jason's business loans, and Amanda's mortgage arrears, they were collectively asking for nearly $500,000, not as a structured loan or investment, but as familial obligation. Then came the statement that sent a chill through me. After all, my father added his tone, suggesting he was playing his trump card. "We raised. You put a roof over your head, fed you for 18 years. You owe us that much at least." The room fell silent as everyone waited for my response. 5 pairs of eyes watched me expectantly, assuming my immediate agreement was forthcoming. "I need some time to think about this," I said finally, my voice calmer than I felt. "This is a significant request. I will let you know my decision tomorrow." As I left the apartment to check into my hotel, I could feel their disappointment and confusion radiating behind me. In their minds, my hesitation was incomprehensible. After all, is not helping family the right thing to do? But as I drove through the darkened streets of my hometown, more complex emotions swirled within me. This was not simply about money, it was about patterns of behavior, accountability, and what true help really meant. I had some difficult decisions to make before morning. I barely slept that night in my hotel room. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the expectant faces of my family members waiting for me to solve their problems with a stroke of my checkbook. Their unquestioning assumption that I would and should bail them out without hesitation kept me tossing and turning until dawn. By morning I was exhausted, but no closer to a decision. I went for a long run through the neighborhood, where I had grown up passing my old high school, and the park where I used to train for cross-country. The familiar surroundings brought back memories both painful and formative of my journey to independence. Back in my hotel room, I called Devin, now not just my former colleague, but one of my closest friends and most trusted advisors. "They expect me to write checks that would total close to $500,000, I explained, after outlining the situation. "No repayment plan, no changes to their spending habits, just because we are family." Devin was silent for a moment before responding. "What would happen to that money if you gave it to them?" It was the right question, one I had been avoiding. Based on their history, my parents would continue supporting my siblings instead of securing their retirement. Jason would start another business venture without proper planning and lose it all again. Amanda and her husband would keep their house they cannot afford and continue living beyond their means. "So your financial help would enable the same patterns that created this crisis," Devin observed. "Exactly. But they are still my family," I sighed. "Despite everything, I do not want to see them suffer." "There is a difference between helping someone and enabling them," Devin said. "Real help might look different than what they are asking for." After our call, I spent hours researching my family's situations more thoroughly. I contacted a financial advisor friend for general advice on situations like these. I created spreadsheets analyzing different approaches to assistance and their likely outcomes. Then I decided to dig deeper into what was really happening with my family. I called my father's former colleague, whom I had met at company events years ago. Without revealing too much, I learned my father had been offered several reasonable positions after his retirement, but had declined them as beneath his expertise level. I discovered my mother had turned down a partnership with a younger, more tech-savvy real estate agent that could have revitalized her business. Through social media, I saw Jason still posted photos of himself at expensive restaurants and clubs, despite claiming extreme financial hardship. Amanda's Instagram showed recent family vacations and shopping sprees amid their mortgage crisis. Most concerning was learning from a family friend that my parents had recently liquidated the remainder of their IRA to help Amanda make a single mortgage payment, rather than advising her to sell the house. They clearly could not afford. That afternoon, I went to a small park near my hotel and sat watching families play with their children, couples walking hand in hand, and elderly people feeding birds. Normal people living within their means, making responsible choices, dealing with life's challenges without expecting magical rescues. Sitting on that park bench, clarity finally came. If I truly wanted to help my family, I needed to do so in a way that broke their destructive patterns rather than reinforcing them. Writing blank checks would not only deplete my resources, but ultimately harm them by deepening their dependency and financial irresponsibility. I spent the next several hours drafting a comprehensive plan, one that offered genuine assistance but required real commitment to change. My proposal included financial support tied to specific actions, accountability measures, and a path toward true independence for each family member. It was firm but fair, designed to help them build sustainable futures rather than temporary relief. As I finalized the details, I recognized this approach would likely be met with resistance. They wanted an easy solution: money, without strings rescue, without responsibility. What I planned to offer was more difficult, but ultimately more valuable a chance to rebuild with dignity and develop the skills they had never properly learned. I called my parents and arranged to meet everyone for dinner at their apartment the next evening. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and resolve. This would be one of the most difficult conversations of my life, but also potentially the most important for all of us. That night, I slept soundly for the first time since arriving in Ohio. Whatever their reaction might be, I knew my offer came from a place of genuine care rather than resentment or revenge. I was prepared to help my family, but on terms that would truly serve their long-term well-being, not just their immediate desires. As I drove to my parents' apartment the following evening, I rehearsed what I would say and steeled myself for their potential rejection. The documentation of my proposal sat in a folder on the passenger seat, a comprehensive plan for family recovery, rather than a simple bailout. I took a deep breath before knocking on their door, knowing this night would likely change our family dynamic forever, for better or worse. When I arrived at my parents' apartment, everyone was already there, creating an atmosphere of anticipation. My mother had prepared another home-cooked meal, clearly, hoping to recreate the warmth of family dinners from better times. The conversation remained strained and superficial throughout dinner, with everyone carefully avoiding the topic that had brought us together. Finally, as my mother served coffee in the living room, my father cleared his throat. "So, Marcus, have you had time to consider our situation? What can we expect in terms of your help?" All eyes turned to me. I opened my briefcase and removed the folder I had prepared. "I have given this a lot of thought," I began, "and yes, I am willing to help, but not in the way you might be expecting." I distributed copies of the document I had created, a detailed plan titled Family Financial Recovery Program. "What is this?" Jason asked, flipping through the pages with a frown. "This is how I am willing to help," I explained. "I have created a structured plan for each of you that addresses your specific situations." I turned to my parents first. "Mom, Dad, I am prepared to help with your basic living expenses for the next 12 months, but with conditions. First, you will need to work with a professional financial advisor who I will pay for. Second, I will match any income you earn during this period to incentivize building new revenue streams. Third, I want you to take career development courses to update your skills, which I will also fund completely." My father's face reddened. "We do not need career courses at our age. We need financial assistance." "With respect, Dad, you do need updated skills. The financial industry has changed dramatically, and Mom's real estate business could thrive with modern marketing approaches. You are both too young to simply retire, especially with your current financial situation." I turned to Jason next. "For you, I am offering a position at my company in Seattle, entry-level with standard pay, but with a clear advancement path if you perform well. Before that, you will need to complete a 3-month financial literacy program and business fundamentals course, also fully paid by me." "An entry-level job," Jason scoffed. "I have business experience already, and I cannot just move to Seattle. My life is here." "Your business experience includes a failed venture that lost $200,000 in 8 months, I replied evenly. "The training is non-negotiable, and yes, it would require relocation. Your life here currently consists of working part-time and living in our parents' spare bedroom at age 30. Finally, I addressed Amanda and Stephen. "For you, I am willing to help negotiate with your bank and potentially assist with refinancing your mortgage, but only if you sell your current house and purchase something within your actual budget. I will also cover financial counseling sessions for both of you." The room fell silent as they processed my terms. Then the reactions began, exactly as I had anticipated. My mother spoke first, her voice quivering. "This feels so cold, Marcus. We are family, not business associates. We do not need contracts and conditions to help each other." "This is ridiculous," my father added. "You come back here, after barely communicating for years now, successful and apparently wealthy. And instead of helping your family in crisis, you lecture us with some corporate recovery plan. Is this how you show off your success?" Jason was more direct. "So basically, you want to control all of us. Make us your employees and students instead of just helping out your brother when he needs it. Pretty power-trippy, Marcus." Amanda had tears streaming down her face. "Do you have any idea how humiliating it would be to sell our house? What would we tell our friends? The kids' friends. Their school is in that neighborhood. I had expected these responses, but they still stung. I took a deep breath before responding. I understand this is not what you wanted to hear, but this plan comes from a place of genuine concern. Writing checks would be easy for me, but it would not solve the underlying problems. Within a year or two, you would be in the exact same position or worse. You do not know that, my father argued. These are extraordinary circumstances, not patterns. This was the opening I needed. Actually, they are patterns, and they started long before your recent financial troubles. I stood up and paced the small living room, decades of unspoken truths, finally finding voice. Do you remember my 16th birthday? Amanda got a brand new Volkswagen Beetle for hers. Jason received a Jeep Wrangler. I got permission to use the family Honda occasionally. When I asked why, you said you were teaching me responsibility. I turned to face them directly. In college, I worked 35 hours a week while taking full course loads because you decided not to pay for my education like you did for Amanda and Jason. I ate ramen noodles and shared apartments with multiple roommates while Amanda lived in a private dorm at Princeton. My mother interrupted. We have explained this, Marcus. You were always more independent. No, I said firmly. That was the excuse, not the reason. The truth is, you consistently gave Amanda and Jason more attention, more resources, more opportunities, more money. And when they graduated college, you gave them each $200,000 while I received a $500 gift card and a used laptop. The room fell silent. This was the first time I had laid out the pattern so explicitly. I have known about the $200,000 gifts for years. I confronted you about it the night after my graduation, and you told me I was financially irresponsible, despite all evidence to the contrary. That night I realized I would never be seen as equal to my siblings in this family. My father started to protest, but I continued. The painful irony is that your favoritism ultimately benefited me. Because you did not give me handouts, I learned to work harder than anyone else. Because you did not pay for my education, I learned to budget and save. Because you did not give me $200,000, I learned to build wealth through my own efforts rather than expecting it to be handed to me. I sat back down, my voice softer now. I do not say this out of bitterness or to make you feel guilty. I say it because the same patterns that created inequality between your children have created the financial crisis you are in now. You enabled Amanda and Jason to make poor financial choices without consequences, and now they lack the skills to navigate hardship. Jason stood up angrily. This is bullshit. You are just using this situation to get revenge for your childhood grievances. If I wanted revenge, I replied calmly, I would simply say no and walk away. This plan represents hundreds of hours of work and potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of my money to help you all build better futures. That is not revenge. It is the opposite. For nearly an hour, the conversation continued in circles. My family cycled between anger negotiation, guilt-tripping, and occasional moments of reflection. I remained firm on the core principles of my offer while being flexible on specific details. Finally, exhausted by the emotional intensity, I stood to leave. I understand this is not the answer you hoped for. My offer stands, but I cannot force any of you to accept it. Think about it for a week. If you decide my conditions are too restrictive, I respect that choice. But I will not provide financial assistance without accountability measures. That would not be helping, it would be enabling. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that I do love you all. That is why I am offering real help rather than temporary relief. I walked out into the cool evening air, emotionally drained, but with the strange lightness that comes from finally speaking your truth. Whether they accepted my offer or not, I had done what I believed was right, offering genuine assistance without compromising my principles. Now the choice was theirs, and I would respect whatever they decided. The drive back to my hotel was quiet, with no phone calls or text messages from family members. I assumed they were still processing everything, or perhaps had already dismissed my offer entirely. Either way, I had peace, knowing I had approached the situation with integrity rather than resentment. Tomorrow, I would fly back to Seattle and returned to the company I had built through perseverance and self-reliance qualities I had developed. Not despite my family's treatment, but because of it. In a strange way, I owed them a debt of gratitude for the very strength that now allowed me to offer them help on my own terms. The week after I returned to Seattle passed in silence. No calls from my parents, no texts from my siblings. I immersed myself in work, trying not to check my phone every hour for messages that never came. By the following weekend, I had resigned myself to their rejection. They wanted unconditional financial rescue, not the more challenging path I had offered. Then, late Sunday evening, my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen. "Marcus," he said, when I answered, his voice sounding older and more subdued than I remembered. "Are you available to talk?" "Of course," I replied, bracing myself for anger or manipulation. "Not over the phone," he clarified. "I was wondering if you might be willing to come back to Ohio next weekend, just to meet with me, alone." His request surprised me. Just us. "Yes. There are things I need to say to you that should be said in person." I agreed and booked another flight to Cleveland, unsure what to expect. Part of me feared this was a strategy. Get me alone, wear down my resolve extract, financial help, without the conditions I had set. Another part hoped for something more meaningful, genuine understanding, perhaps even reconciliation. When I arrived at my parents' apartment that Saturday, my father suggested we take a walk. It was a crisp autumn day, leaves crunching beneath our feet as we strolled through a nearby park in silence for several minutes. Finally he spoke. "I owe you an apology, Marcus. A profound one." I glanced at him, taken aback by his directness. "After you left last week, I was angry, convinced you were being stubborn and vindictive." He paused. "But then your mother found a box of your old report cards and awards in the storage unit. Academic achievements, athletic medals, scholarship letters, evidence of your excellence that we had packed away and hardly acknowledged at the time." He stopped walking and turned to face me. "Seeing all of that, remembering the child and young man you were, it forced me to confront an uncomfortable truth. You were right about how we treated you differently." "Why did you?" I asked the question that had haunted me for decades. My father's eyes grew distant. "I grew up poor, something I rarely discussed with you children. My parents could barely keep food on the table. I worked from age 12, missed many opportunities because we could not afford them. When I finally achieved financial success, I overcompensated with your sister and brother. I wanted to give them everything I never had." "But not me," I said quietly. He nodded, eyes filling with tears. "With you, something different happened. You showed such natural capability, such independence from an early age. Instead of supporting that strength, I think I resented it in some way. You reminded me of myself, the part of myself I associated with struggle and hardship. Unconsciously, I pushed you to face the same challenges I had faced." "That does not make it right," I said. "No, it does not. Nothing makes it right." His voice broke. "In trying to spare Amanda and Jason from struggle, I denied them the opportunity to develop resilience. And in forcing you to struggle unnecessarily, I caused pain that no child should experience from a parent. I failed all three of you, but you most egregiously." We resumed walking as he continued. "Your mother and I have talked extensively since your visit. She would like to speak with you too. We have decided to accept your offer, all of it, exactly as you proposed. Not because we need the money, though we do, but because we recognize the wisdom in your approach." When we returned to the apartment, my mother was waiting. The three of us sat at their small kitchen table, and she reached for my hands. "I enabled your father's unequal treatment," she admitted. "I saw it happening and did nothing to stop it. Then I made excuses to rationalize it instead of acknowledging the harm we were causing. I am so deeply sorry, Marcus." Their apologies were unexpected and disarming. For years I had imagined confronting them about their favoritism, but never once had I envisioned them actually acknowledging it, let alone apologizing. Over the next few hours, we had the most honest conversation of our lives. They asked about my journey since college, really asked with genuine interest rather than superficial inquiries. I shared the struggles and triumphs of building my company, the lessons learned through necessity, the values that guided my decisions. By evening, we had reached a new understanding. They would accept my structured assistance plan, including the financial counseling and career development requirements. My father even expressed interest in consulting for my company, remotely offering his experience in traditional financial systems that could complement our innovative technology. "What about Amanda and Jason?" I asked eventually. My mother sighed. "They are still processing everything. Amanda is angry, feeling her lifestyle is being threatened. Jason oscillates between resentment and recognition that his current path is unsustainable. They might not accept my offer," I acknowledged. "That will be their choice," my father said with a newfound firmness that surprised me. "But your mother and I will no longer enable their financial irresponsibility regardless of what they decide. That pattern ends now." Over the following months, my family's response to my offer unfolded gradually. My parents embraced the financial counseling and discovered new purpose through the career development courses I funded. My father began consulting part-time with financial institutions transitioning to digital systems, while my mother partnered with a tech-savvy young real estate agent who helped her establish an online presence. Jason initially rejected my offer, convinced he could secure funding for another business venture. 3 months later, after facing continued rejection from investors, he called to ask if the position at my company was still available. It was, though I maintained the requirement that he complete financial literacy training first. To my surprise, he agreed without argument. Amanda and her husband held out the longest, unwilling to give up their expensive home and the social status it represented. The turning point came when they received a final foreclosure notice. With no other options, they accepted my offer to help negotiate with their bank and assist in finding a more affordable house. The process was humbling for them, but ultimately led to a more sustainable lifestyle. Within a year, remarkable changes took place. My parents established a modest but reliable consulting income that, combined with their remaining retirement funds and my supplemental support, provided financial stability. They moved to a nicer apartment and began rebuilding their savings. Jason completed his training and relocated to Seattle, starting in an entry-level data analysis role at my company. His natural charisma, combined with newly developed discipline, made him an effective team member. While we maintained professional boundaries at work, our personal relationship slowly healed through weekly dinners and occasional hiking trips in the Pacific Northwest. Amanda and her family adjusted to their smaller home and more modest lifestyle. The financial counseling helped her and Stephen develop budgeting skills they had never learned. Though our relationship remained the most strained, small steps toward reconciliation began with monthly video calls and honest conversations. Throughout this transformation, we established a new family tradition: Sunday night virtual dinners, where all of us connected by video from our respective locations. Initially awkward, these gatherings gradually became meaningful connections, as we learned to relate as adults rather than through old family dynamics. The healing process was neither perfect nor complete. Old resentments occasionally surfaced, particularly during holidays or when financial decisions needed to be made. But with each difficult conversation handled maturely, with each boundary respected, with each promise kept, trust slowly rebuilt. For me, the experience brought complex emotions. There was satisfaction in seeing positive changes, but never vindictiveness in their prior struggles. There was pride in my ability to help, but humility in recognizing my own imperfections and ongoing growth. Most importantly, there was a gradual release of the hurt I had carried since childhood. Not forgotten, but no longer defining my identity or relationships. 2 years after that first confrontational family meeting, I visited my parents in their new apartment, now thoughtfully decorated and properly sized for their needs. As we shared coffee on their small balcony, my father asked a question that caught me off guard. "Do you think you will ever fully forgive us, Marcus?" I considered his question carefully before answering. I think forgiveness is not a single moment, but a process. We are in that process now. The past cannot be undone, but we are writing a different future together. That matters more to me than complete resolution of old wounds. He nodded, seeming to understand. "The greatest lesson I have learned," I continued, "is that true success is not measured by financial achievements, though those are valuable. It is measured by integrity, resilience, and the courage to break unhealthy cycles, whether in business or family relationships. Money can be lost and regained, but character and wisdom, once developed, become permanent assets." Looking back now, I recognize that my family's journey reflects a universal truth patterns established over decades. Cannot be changed overnight, but with commitment and accountability, even the most entrenched dynamics can evolve. Financial resources can enable change, but they cannot create it. That requires honest self-reflection and consistent action. Today, our family functions on a foundation of mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. My parents have embraced their new phase of life with dignity and purpose. My siblings have developed financial independence and responsibility. And I have found something I never expected, a sense of peace with my place in our family story. The inequality of our past shaped us all for better and worse, but in addressing it directly, we found a path toward healing that no amount of money alone could have purchased. That perhaps is the most valuable inheritance any family can share. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who expected financial help without accountability? How did you balance compassion with necessary firmness? Share your experiences in the comments below, and do not forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing we can do for others is not what they want, but what they truly need. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you wisdom and courage in your own family relationships.